1931, the asylum's imposing Gothic facade and spire dominate, a stark visual of its hidden realities. Victorian asylums subjected patients to neglect, overcrowding and harsh treatments. This forbidden photo, taken against orders, offered a rare glimpse into its secretive world. 1934, a patient suppressed intake file lists novel reading as committal reason. Victorian asylums confined women for trivial acts, arbitrarily deeming them insane. This record exposes the cruel, flimsy pretexts for institutionalization and widespread asylum abuse. 1936, a confiscated photo reveals patients' personal clothes burning in a hospital incinerator, their identities symbolically erased. Victorian asylums stripped patients of belongings and dignity upon admission. This dehumanizing process aimed to control and subdue them, erasing their past lives. This image, meant to be destroyed, starkly illustrates the systematic removal of identity and autonomy within these institutions. 1936, a new patient's portrait, fear-filled face in a numbered smock. Victorian asylums stripped identities, assigning numbers and uniforms. Dehumanization was routine. This confiscated image reveals profound fear and loss of self, exposing asylum's harsh reality. 1938, an official photo of the hydrotherapy suite, framed to hide its restraints and stained walls. Victorian asylums used hydrotherapy for calming patients, often involving abusive prolonged immersion or cold water as punishment. This official image obscures the brutal reality and fear associated with these treatments. 1941, a leaked photo shows a patient forcibly wrapped in cold, wet sheets, a treatment known as wet packing. Victorian asylums used this torturous method for calming patients, enduring hours of enforced immobility. This image, never meant for public eyes, exposes the inhumane practices and extreme physical restraint within these institutions. 1939, a hospital brochure photo shows smiling nurses, a stark contrast to the asylum's harsh reality. Victorian asylums often used deceptive propaganda, presenting a facade of care. This concealed widespread abuse, neglect, and inhumane conditions suffered by patients. This image, designed to attract admissions, perpetuated a myth. It obscured the genuine suffering within, a testament to institutional deceit. 1942, a secret photo captures an asylum orderly brandishing a leather strap, a tool of control. Asylums relied on intimidation and physical punishment. Staff brutality was common and often hidden. This forbidden image, leading to quiet dismissal, revealed systemic abuse and complicity. 1942, a censored image shows a woman submerged in a continuous bath, her head barely visible above a canvas cover. Victorian asylums used this treatment to calm patients, often for days, causing severe distress and sensory deprivation. This photo, meant to be hidden, exposed the inhumane, prolonged suffering and cruel practices within these institutions. 1942, swollen, waterlogged hands of a patient, photographed after prolonged hydrotherapy. Asylums used continuous baths for days as treatment, causing severe physical and mental harm. This forbidden image exposed hidden suffering and institutional abuse. 1944, an official photo shows asylum children on a lawn, visibly forced to smile. Victorian asylums confined children for poverty or minor issues, subjecting them to severe neglect and abuse. This propaganda image masked the profound suffering within these hidden children's wards. 1946, a smuggled photo shows a child's terrified eye peering through a crack in a darkened seclusion room door. Victorian asylums routinely used isolation and physical restraint on children, often for minor infractions, causing lasting trauma. This forbidden image, a brave act of defiance, exposed the cruelty of child confinement. 1935, a medical textbook photograph illustrates the now discredited practice of uterine massage on an unwilling female patient. Hysteria was a common Victorian diagnosis, subjecting women to invasive and often abusive pseudoscientific treatments in asylums. This image reveals how medical authority justified coercive practices, now universally deemed harmful and unscientific. 1940, a secret group photo reveals young women, institutionalized for pregnancy outside marriage. In Victorian society, unwed mothers faced extreme social ostracism, often confined to asylums by families to preserve honor. This forbidden image reveals the harsh societal punishment for perceived moral transgressions, exposing hidden suffering and control. 1947, a promotional photo shows a gleaming electroconvulsive therapy machine. ECT was adopted in asylums, often without consent or anesthesia, causing much patient suffering. This image hid the brutal reality and trauma inflicted by this controversial treatment. 1949, a banned photo shows the violence of unanesthetized ECT on a patient. Early ECT in asylums lacked anesthesia, causing brutal convulsions and severe trauma. This image exposes the horrifying reality and cruelty of institutional treatment. 1937, posed female patients dutifully work in an asylum laundry, presented as restorative work. Asylums exploited patients for free labor, disguised as therapy to cut costs, not their benefit. This image, a facade, exposed patient exploitation and neglect, masking forced labor as beneficial therapy. 1943, a close-up forbidden photo reveals a patient's bleeding, calloused hands after an arduous 12-hour shift scrubbing floors. Victorian asylums exploited patients for free labor, disguised as therapy, often forcing them into brutal, long hours with no respite. This image exposes the systematic abuse and severe neglect within these institutions, demonstrating the human cost of forced labor. 1933, a medical journal photo shows a patient confined to a cage-like bed, dubbed a soothing restraint. Victorian asylums routinely used mechanical restraints like cribs to control patients, often for prolonged periods, causing immense psychological and physical harm. This image, despite its soothing label, reveals the brutal reality of enforced confinement and inhumane treatment. 1945, an evidence photo reveals frantic scratch marks on the inside lid of an asylum crib. Victorian asylums used cribs as restraints, confining patients for extended periods, causing immense distress and despair. This grim photo from an investigation quietly exposed the profound suffering and desperate attempts at escape. 1951, Dr. Walter Freeman performs a transorbital lobotomy in a patient's home, wielding an ice pick-like instrument. Lobotomies were a widely performed, controversial cure for mental illness, often with devastating effects. Freeman popularized this brutal, invasive procedure, performed quickly outside hospitals. This candid image captures the horrifying, unregulated nature of such treatment, exposing the lack of ethics and patient consent prevalent at the time. 1953, a family portrait censored to obscure the daughter's post-lobotomy vacant stare. Lobotomies, a brutal asylum cure, caused irreversible damage, altering patients and erasing their identities. This censored image highlights the tragic impact of lobotomies, often concealed by families. 1950, beds are crammed inches apart in a dormitory, creating a serious fire hazard. Overcrowding was endemic in asylums, leading to unsanitary conditions, neglect, and increased risk for patients. This photo, submitted but suppressed by newspapers, revealed the dangerous reality, highlighting institutional failure and public ignorance. 1952, a blurry hidden camera image shows patients sleeping on a cold stone floor, entirely bedless. Asylums faced extreme overcrowding and underfunding, forcing patients into neglect and brutal deprivation. This illicit photo exposed the grim reality and systemic failures of these shameful institutions. 1948, patients lie in hypoglycemic shock within a ward, unconscious from insulin coma therapy. This dangerous, unproven treatment in asylums induced comas for curing schizophrenia, carrying high risks. The photo reveals extreme experimental measures, highlighting unethical practices and patient vulnerability. 1949, a hidden photo shows staff trying to revive a patient from a coma. Insulin coma therapy, a dangerous asylum cure, often caused irreversible coma or death. Staff were unprepared. This nurse's hidden photo revealed the true human cost of brutal, unproven treatments. 1954, a staged photo shows docile patients attending a chapel service under the watchful eyes of staff. Asylums used religion for moral control and conformity rather than genuine spiritual care. Services were often mandatory, promoting obedience and suppressing individuality. This image, though staged, shows pervasive control and lack of patient autonomy, a reality beneath a facade of piety. 1956, a Polaroid shows a patient forced to wear an unclean sign for questioning religious authority. Asylums used religious dogma for control, punishing nonconformity. This forbidden image reveals shaming tactics, exposing psychological abuse within the institutions. 1955, the official staff portrait shows the asylum's keepers displaying rigid hierarchy and stern faces. Untrained staff held unchecked power. Understaffing and poor oversight led to widespread patient neglect and abuse. This image captures the authority that shaped patients' lives, reflecting a system of control, not care. 1957, a secret photo by a patient shows unexplained bruises on a woman's neck and shoulders, evidence of unseen harm. Asylums often concealed staff brutality and patient abuse with little oversight. These injuries suggest physical assault, a grim reality for many confined within. This illicit photo, risking severe punishment for the photographer, courageously exposed the hidden violence and systemic failure of care. 1950, Asylum's pristine published surgical suite symbolizing scientific progress. Facilities conducted experimental cures like lobotomies, often without consent, causing irreversible harm. Propaganda hid ethical abuses and brutal procedures behind its gleaming facade. 1952, a whistleblower's photo shows rusty surgical tools being wiped with a dirty rag before a procedure. Asylums often had poor hygiene and insufficient sterilization, leading to infections and complications during medical procedures. Patient safety was severely compromised. This forbidden image exposed dangerous, unhygienic practices, revealing the grim reality behind institutional claims of care. 1958, a sanitized image shows elderly patients sitting quietly in rocking chairs, portrayed as receiving peaceful end-of-life care. Victorian asylums warehoused elderly, often without mental illness, due to family inability or unwillingness to care. This propaganda photo hid widespread neglect, overcrowding, and lack of dignified care these vulnerable individuals truly endured. 1960, a shocking suppressed photo reveals elderly patients tied to their chairs with bedsheets. Asylums, chronically understaffed, resorted to cruel physical restraints like this to control patients and minimize supervision. This image, meant to be hidden, exposed the inhumane conditions and severe neglect within these institutions, revealing systemic abuse. 1961, a diagram from a fringe medical journal depicts an electroshock device used in homosexual aversion therapy. Medical institutions subjected gay individuals to brutal, pseudoscientific cures, aiming for forced conformity. This diagram, though published, exposes horrifying tools of persecution and the systematic pathologizing of sexual orientation. 1961, a young man's terrified face as he is strapped into a chair for aversion therapy. Asylums subjected gay individuals to brutal, pseudoscientific cures, inflicting immense psychological and physical harm. This confiscated image reveals profound fear, exposing the cruel, unethical practices of forced therapy. 1957, a newly built solitary confinement cell is presented, praised for its security and efficiency. Asylums used seclusion for control and punishment, often causing immense psychological harm and sensory deprivation to patients. This image reveals the institutional acceptance of isolating vulnerable patients, highlighting inherent cruelty in the name of order. 1962, a 1962 exposé photo reveals desperate messages and calendars scratched into the paint of a Stark asylum seclusion cell. Asylums used prolonged solitary confinement as punishment, causing severe psychological torture. These crude markings were their only communication. This grim image from a brave exposé directly exposed the inhumane conditions and profound suffering within, shattering institutional secrecy. 1939, a clinical photograph shows violent bone-breaking seizures induced by metrazole drug therapy. Asylums used metrazole for convulsive therapy, often without anesthesia, to cure mental illness, causing extreme physical trauma. This image reveals the brutal experimental nature of early psychiatric treatments and the profound suffering endured by patients. 1940, a smuggled note photographed before destruction from a patient pleading to avoid metrazole therapy. Asylums used metrazole to induce violent seizures, causing extreme fear and physical trauma, often against patients' will. This desperate note exposed individual suffering, highlighting the coercive and inhumane nature of asylum treatments. 1959, a promotional photo for thorazine shows a smiling patient, allegedly cured by the new tranquilizer. These drugs promised a revolution, yet continued the asylum's legacy of control and patient subjugation. This image, a marketing tool, obscured the severe side effects and ongoing ethical questions surrounding coerced medication. 1963, heavily sedated patients, their bodies rigid, shuffle aimlessly in a hospital yard. The widespread use of powerful tranquilizers like thorazine in asylums subdued patients, often causing severe side effects and suppressing their individuality. This clandestine film still exposed the chemical subjugation, highlighting ethical concerns and the dehumanizing reality of overmedication within institutions. 1960, a cheerful photo of a family picnic on asylum grounds, carefully stage-managed for public view. Asylums used such events to mask rampant neglect and abuse, presenting a false facade of care. This propaganda image hid true suffering, perpetuating public ignorance of asylum realities. 1960, a patient's hand discreetly passes a note detailing abuse to a visiting relative, an act of desperate communication. Asylums tightly controlled patient contact, censoring letters and supervising visits to hide mistreatment. This forbidden image reveals hidden suffering and patient resilience. The relative's subsequent barring confirmed repressive asylum tactics. 1935, a doctor measures a patient's skull with calipers, part of a now infamous eugenics study. Asylums implemented eugenics, forcibly sterilizing or segregating those deemed unfit to improve society. This pseudoscience justified horrific abuses. This image reveals the chilling extent of institutional power, denying human rights and perpetuating systemic discrimination. 1941, a photo shows an illiterate patient's X on a sterilization consent form. Asylums used eugenics, sterilizing vulnerable patients to improve society. This photo exposed severe human rights abuses, revealing systemic discrimination. 1948, a psychology textbook image shows a clean, empty padded cell, presented as a humane tool for patient management. Padded cells in asylums were ostensibly for safety, but often used for punishment and isolation, causing psychological distress. This sanitized image masked the reality of cruel confinement, portraying restraint as caring. It became part of institutional deception. 1951, a graphic police photo reveals bloodstains and filth inside a padded cell after a patient's accident. Padded cells were often used for harsh punishment and prolonged isolation in asylums, leading to unsanitary conditions and severe harm. This evidence exposes the brutal reality of institutional neglect, shattering the facade of humane care and revealing hidden suffering. 1955, a heavily redacted letter from a patient, captured by a sympathetic male orderly. Asylums strictly censored patient correspondence, suppressing reports of abuse, neglect, and inhumane conditions. Communication with the outside world was tightly controlled. This forbidden image exposed institutional secrecy, offering a rare glimpse into a patient's silenced voice and the fight for truth. 1964, an investigation photo reveals bags of confiscated patient mail rotting in a hospital basement. Asylums censored patient letters, silencing abuse and isolating individuals. This exposed systemic deception and the profound silencing of patient voices. 1938, a pastoral photograph shows patients tending to livestock, framed as idyllic and therapeutic. Asylums often used patients for free agricultural labor, exploiting them under the guise of occupational therapy. This work primarily served to sustain the institution, not genuinely rehabilitate the patients. This image, though seemingly benign, concealed the harsh reality of patient exploitation and forced labor, revealing a facade over institutional abuse. 1942, a secret photo reveals emaciated, malnourished patients working an asylum farm. Asylums exploited patient labor, denying them the food they produced. Malnutrition was rife. This forbidden image exposed brutal neglect and systemic cruelty. 1957, a photo shows a superintendent's office displaying his many prestigious medical degrees. Despite such qualifications, superintendents often oversaw rampant neglect, abuse, and brutal treatments in asylums. These diplomas provided a facade of legitimate care, obscuring the grim realities and severe ethical failings. 1960, a leaked document photographed by a morgue assistant lists natural causes for a patient with clear signs of trauma. Asylums often falsified records to conceal neglect, abuse, or fatal treatments, protecting their reputation and staff. This covered up true patient suffering and institutional failures. This leaked photo exposed the systematic deception and corruption, demonstrating how institutions evaded accountability for patient deaths. 1962, a posed photo shows patients playing a listless game of checkers, meant to convey well-being. Asylums often staged recreational activities to project an image of humane care, masking widespread neglect and understimulation. This propaganda concealed the reality of patient boredom and lack of genuine therapy, maintaining a false public perception. 1965, a janitor's secret photo of powerful, disturbing artwork created by asylum patients. Asylums suppressed patient creativity, viewing it as illness or defiance, confiscating art to maintain control and silence their voices. This hidden collection reveals patients' raw inner lives, their artistic voices deemed too potent and later ordered destroyed. 1949, a defiant young woman's intake photo admitted for promiscuity and rebellion. Asylums confined women for moral transgressions, not illness, controlling female behavior. This exposes psychiatry weaponized against female autonomy, punishing nonconformity. 1959, the same woman from 1949 post-lobotomy appears muted, compliant. Lobotomies were brutally used to cure women for nonconformity, suppressing individuality and erasing personalities. This unofficial photo reveals the tragic human cost of medical control. 1961, a state health department report photo shows a clean, orderly day room, seemingly reflecting humane asylum conditions. State reports often presented sanitized views of asylums, concealing widespread overcrowding, neglect, and lack of genuine therapeutic care behind a carefully constructed facade. This image served as propaganda, deliberately misrepresenting the grim reality and perpetuating public ignorance of systemic failures. 1961, unretouched photo reveals patients huddled on a filthy day room floor amidst visible debris. Official reports hid severe overcrowding, neglect, and brutal patient conditions, presenting a false facade. This image exposes state health department deception. Censored from reports, this photo exposed undeniable evidence of appalling institutional neglect and suffering, revealing the true hidden truth. 1966, a newspaper photo captures a smiling governor touring the best ward of a state hospital. Politicians visited carefully staged wards to hide systemic neglect, projecting a false image of humane care. This propaganda image masked dire reality, deceiving the public and delaying critical reforms. 1966, a governor's aides photo reveals a locked, hidden ward filled with naked, neglected patients. Asylums hid horrific abuse and neglect from official tour. This forbidden image, taken by an aide, exposed institutional deception, revealing the brutal truth of these vulnerable patients' suffering. 1968, a press conference announces plans to shift patients from large institutions to community care. Deinstitutionalization promised humane care but often lacked vital community support, leaving many vulnerable. This photo symbolized a progressive shift, yet foreshadowed new challenges and neglect for released patients. 1971, newly freed patients are abandoned in a city center with no resources. Deinstitutionalization promised care but lacked vital community support for former asylum patients. This poignant image exposes policy failures, abandoning vulnerable individuals to profound hardship. 1958, the cover of a damning state investigation into asylum deaths, photographed before it was classified. Governments often suppressed reports detailing asylum abuses and neglect to protect institutional reputations and avoid public scrutiny. This prevented accountability and reform. This photograph preserved evidence of systemic failures, exposing deliberate efforts to bury truths about patient suffering and premature deaths. 1962, a shadowy photo captures a nurse giving testimony to a journalist, her identity obscured to protect her. Whistleblowers faced severe reprisal for exposing asylum abuses, risking safety. Institutions actively suppressed dissent, silencing crucial voices. This image symbolizes the immense bravery needed to expose hidden truths and systemic cruelty. 1965, a photo reveals a vast field of numbered, anonymous stone markers recording thousands of patient deaths. Asylums buried patients in unmarked grave, denying dignity and obscuring the true death toll from neglect and poor conditions. These markers symbolize society's systemic disregard, a stark testament to countless forgotten lives and institutional failure. 1970, a suppressed photo shows a construction project accidentally unearthing an unmarked mass grave on asylum grounds. Asylums often buried patients in unmarked grave, concealing high death tolls from neglect, disease, and poor conditions. This accidental discovery exposed institutional deception and the scale of human tragedy, forcing acknowledgement of hidden atrocities. 1963, a photo shows a nurse administering unlabeled pills to a line of patients, part of an unsanctioned drug trial. Asylums conducted unethical, unsanctioned drug trials on vulnerable patients, often without consent or knowledge. This image exposed profound medical exploitation, highlighting the severe disregard for patient rights and institutional impunity. 1966, an unpublished medical photo shows a patient with severe tardive dyskinesia. Early antipsychotics used in asylums for control caused debilitating, often irreversible neurological side effects. This image exposed the horrific human cost and permanent damage from psychiatric drugs, revealing systemic medical negligence. 1959, a staged photograph shows asylum staff handing out meager gifts to patients at a Christmas party. This image was intended for a local newspaper, used by asylums to project a facade of humane care and community spirit. It concealed the pervasive neglect and lack of genuine warmth, masking the true harsh realities of institutional life. 1959. A trash can overflows with the same meager gifts discarded by asylum patients. Asylums use such token gestures to mask systemic neglect and their failure to provide genuine care. This quiet act of defiance exposed the superficiality, revealing patients' acute awareness of their dehumanization. 1964. An official photo captures an orderly fire evacuation drill at the hospital. Asylums often staged such drills to create an illusion of safety and competent management, masking severe overcrowding and understaffing. This image presented as propaganda concealed dire safety risks and the reality that many patients would have been trapped in a real emergency. 1967. A real fire leaves patients trapped on a locked asylum ward. Asylums lacked fire safety. Staff abandoned patients in emergencies, prioritizing escape. This horrifying image exposed criminal neglect and proved official drills a dangerous deception. 1955. Clinical photo, patient injected with LSD for a secret CIA mind control experiment. Asylums subjected vulnerable patients to unethical drug trials without consent, often for covert government research. This image exposes profound medical exploitation and the horrific abuse of institutional power. 1955. Frantic, terrified drawings by a patient during an LSD experiment dismissed by researchers as incoherent. Asylums subjected vulnerable patients to unethical drug trials for covert government research, causing profound psychological trauma. These drawings are crucial evidence of suffering, exposing brutal experimental psychiatry and disregard for human dignity. 1958. A heavily retouched file photo of a patient known for multiple escape attempts. Visible injuries from capture were edited out. Asylums brutally punished escapees, concealing patient abuse to maintain control. This image exposes institutional deception, silencing suffering and perpetuating a false narrative. 1961. An amateur photo captures hospital orderlies brutally recapturing a patient, likely after an escape. Asylums punished escapees severely, using excessive force and harsh restraints to maintain control and prevent public exposure of their conditions. This amateur image exposed the violent reality of patient control, revealing the hidden brutality and disregard for human rights in asylums. 1968. A photo shows a staged patient council meeting created to give the illusion of autonomy and patient involvement. Asylums often created such councils to project an image of progressive care, masking the reality of their strict control and denial of patient rights. This image highlighted institutional deception, demonstrating how patient participation was a carefully managed illusion, not genuine empowerment. 1968. A photo shows the patient council's pre-written agenda dictated by hospital administration. Asylums used such councils to fake patient autonomy, masking pervasive control and denying genuine input from those institutionalized. This image exposes institutional deception, revealing how patient empowerment was a carefully managed illusion. 1972. A decaying, recently closed asylum ward shows dust-covered restraints still attached to beds, a haunting legacy. Post-deinstitutionalization, many asylums closed, leaving behind stark evidence of routine, inhumane physical restraint. These practices were standard care for decades. This image reveals the brutal reality of patient confinement, a visceral reminder of systematic abuse, and the dark history of mental health care. 1972. A photo from an abandoned ward shows thousands of patient records left to rot. Institutions often neglected patient privacy, discarding sensitive medical and personal records when closed. This was a grave violation of data protection and human rights. This image exposes systemic disregard for patient data, highlighting institutional failures and a profound lack of respect for individuals' histories. 1965, a PR photo shows a discharged patient shaking hands with the asylum superintendent, presented as a success. Asylums often used such staged photographs for public relations, projecting an image of healing and effective treatment. This concealed widespread abuses and high readmission rates. This propaganda aimed to reassure the public and justify continued funding, masking the grim realities of institutional life. 1965, 6 months later, the same patient's readmission photo, an image the hospital fought to keep private. Many cured patients were quickly readmitted due to lack of proper community support or effective long-term care. This image exposed the facade of successful discharges, revealing systemic failures and the revolving door phenomenon. 1956, an asylum's official weekly menu displaying a balanced, varied diet. Asylums used these for PR, hiding the meager, low-quality food patients truly received. This propaganda concealed widespread malnutrition and systemic neglect. 1956, a cook's secret photo shows rotten vegetables and spoiled meat for patient meals. Asylums gave unsanitary, poor food, funds were diverted. This caused severe malnutrition and illness. This image exposed systemic neglect, proving official menus a lie. 1950, a photograph shows a quiet room, presented as a space for peaceful reflection in an asylum. These quiet rooms were often used for harsh isolation, restraint, or sensory deprivation, serving as punishment rather than therapeutic reflection. They masked profound neglect. This image projected a false sense of humane care, concealing brutal confinement and systemic abuse within the asylum system. 1952, a banned medical diagram illustrates phrenecotomy, a surgery to paralyze patients' vocal cords. Asylums used brutal surgery to silence noisy patients, reflecting profound disregard for humanity. This diagram exposed medical violence and systemic control, brutally silencing patient voices. 1969, a blurry, chaotic staff photo shows patients rioting over inedible food and abuse. Patient uprisings, though rare, exposed pervasive systemic neglect and brutality within asylums, directly challenging institutional authority and enforced silence. This unique image is a powerful, uncensored testament to patient desperation and resistance against their horrific conditions. 1969, a Polaroid reveals the bruised, beaten faces of alleged riot ringleaders, now in solitary confinement. Asylums suppressed patient uprisings with brutal violence, isolating and punishing rebels to reassert absolute control, silencing any dissent. This photograph exposed severe staff brutality and immediate retaliation, revealing the horrific consequences of patient resistance within the system. 1970, a photo shows a reporter being guided through a newly painted, seemingly modern wing of the asylum. Asylums often presented sanitized areas to journalists to conceal widespread neglect and abuse. This created a false impression of reform. This public relations tactic aimed to mislead the public, delaying genuine investigations and masking the institution's true, grim conditions. 1970, a desperate handwritten plea for help is found by a journalist, hidden in a potted plant. Patients often risked severe punishment to expose asylum abuses, attempting to bypass controlled narratives. These hidden messages were desperate cries for freedom, revealing the true, grim realities hidden from public view. 1972, a lawyer's portrait fighting for patient rights. Legal action exposed asylum abuses, demanding dignity for the institutionalized. This image ignited hope, forcing accountability upon a long-abused system. 1972, a former patient's car has its tires slashed, a clear act of intimidation. Former patients faced threats and violence to prevent testimony about asylum abuses, protecting institutional reputations. This image exposes the desperation to silence victims, highlighting the danger faced by those revealing dark truths. 1971, a still frame from a landmark TV documentary exposing shocking asylum conditions. These films finally revealed widespread neglect, abuse, and inhumane patient conditions. Broadcast nationwide, this image ignited outrage, shattering institutional secrecy and demanding reform. 1971, a film canister labeled too disturbing for broadcast holds footage deemed too graphic for public viewing. Documentaries exposed horrific asylum conditions, but censors often cut the most disturbing scenes to avoid shocking audiences excessively. This minimized the full truth. This censored footage revealed the true, unimaginable depths of abuse and neglect, preventing full public reckoning with institutional cruelty. 1974, elderly patients remain in a decaying asylum institutionalized for decades. Deinstitutionalization released many, yet these long-term patients were neglected, lacking community support. This photo exposes systemic abandonment, highlighting those forgotten by shifting mental health care policies. 1975, a former patient stands at the locked gate of a now-closed asylum, the only home they'd known. Deinstitutionalization left many long-term patients with no support. For some, the asylum, despite its cruelty, was their entire world, their only sense of belonging. This poignant image underscores profound displacement, revealing systemic failure to provide adequate post-release care for former residents. 1975, former patient and activist displays a disfiguring lobotomy scar. Lobotomies were barbaric, damaging brains to control patients without consent. This image exposed medical cruelty, voicing victims' plight, empowering patient rights advocacy. 1979, activists place a handmade memorial at a forgotten asylum cemetery. Asylums buried patients in unmarked grave, hiding deaths from neglect and erasing identities. This act honored forgotten lives, confronting systemic injustice and demanding recognition.